You are listening to the Align and Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Monique, and in this episode, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Amanda Walker from the Best Damn Coach podcast. Amanda is a former teacher like me, so that was why it was an instant connection for me, but she was also a former health coach, and now she helps entrepreneurs like you and me become coach, not just become coaches, but really become the best coach that they can be. She teaches them how to create fantastic frameworks, how to grow your business. And I really like that Amanda is very much a straight shooter. She really is a very clear way of explaining things. She has fantastic strategy. And so I thought she would be a great person to have on the podcast so that you can kind of get a glimpse of how she has been growing her business, how she has really remained consistent as she grew. And I think she just has really fantastic strategies for bringing in clients that I wanted to specifically get into in this episode. So I am so looking forward to introducing you to Amanda. So without further ado, let's play that interview with Amanda Walker. So welcome to the Align and Inspire podcast. I have a special guest on the episode today, Amanda Walker from the Best Damn Coach. And I have to tell you, Amanda, I don't think I told you before you even came on, before you introduced yourself. I am thrilled to have you on because we met a little over a year and a half ago now. And I remember speaking to you and I asked you what you did. And you were talking about frameworks and helping coaches. And I thought, oh my gosh, like maybe I could give myself permission to do the thing that I actually want to do with a background as a teacher, because I always felt like, oh, that's so obvious. I have to stick with systems because that's the thing that everyone tells me I need to do. And when I spoke with you, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I could blend it and do the thing I really want to do. And that was like the spark that got me where I am here. So I'm thrilled. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I just like the power of just people wanting like things, like-minded, coming together and just exploring, I think is overlooked. So I'm glad that was a conversation that's like led to where you are now.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, could you maybe let us know a little bit about who you are and who you help?
Yeah, for sure. I'm in sunny Arizona, first off. And I say that because I'm kind of a native. I'm born and raised here, and part of my whole life has been wrapped around coaching. I started coaching when I was 15, youth sports, 5 and 6-year-old boys basketball. And I think for me, that was the domino of events that made me realize that I was like, coaching was in my blood. So everything thereafter has been some semblance of coaching. Went on to coach, for the WNBA in its inaugural season for inner city youth, which was a super cool job. Coached intramural sports, coached high school sports. I became a teacher as well, taught high school, taught all sorts of group fitness. And so I've really spent my entire life like figuring out what it means to be able to give somebody information and give it to them in a way they can comprehend, understand, change their behavior, or change some sort of cue in order to be successful. And so I didn't know all that experience would lead to one day me stumbling into entrepreneurship. I had my second kid and I was like, peace out teaching, because I was part-time making $623 a paycheck every other week, which was ridiculously nothing in Arizona.
Oh my gosh.
And so then I kind of was like, I'm going to figure this out. And then I stumbled into coaching and running my own business, which actually started in health and nutrition space. My first clients were only online, didn't even see people in person because it worked really well with kids' nap times and bedtimes. And my husband was on the SWAT team. So our life was crazy, but he was never consistent. And I loved it. And so then it's really grown from there. And over time, like you, I kind of realized that the thing that I'm actually best at was in front of me the whole time, which was frameworks and building frameworks and understanding that results-driven coaching practices are the key to long-term success and building a foundation. And so that's what I do now. I have a program called the Framework Builder Lab. I teach clients how to leverage the power of frameworks to make money as coaches. And then we have a community called the Best Damn Coach. And soon we're launching a new offer called the Small Bite Offer. And so yeah, that's where I'm at now.
That's awesome. It's so fun to look back and think about, like, the the little breadcrumbs along the way that, of course, this was always what I was meant to do. Like when you said that I was coaching 5 and 6-year-olds, like I started off teaching dance from the time I was maybe 15, 16, and I've been teaching forever. And it was like, there's a lot to like, I mean, we don't call it coaching in dance, but it's very
Right.
similar because you're changing its behaviors and also being able to map
Totally.
things out and things like that. So I love that we had that in common and it was always there. And if you're listening, you might even be able to think about things that you did when you were in high school or, when you were in your 20s that are actually things that you're really, really good at that you don't even realize because they come to you so naturally. So I love that you mentioned that too.
Yeah. I think just to piggyback off of that again too, is those people that have interest in stepping into the coaching world, or maybe you've even been in it for a while and you don't feel totally aligned. I think often we discredit what I call our lived experience. And we say like that isn't a value. And I actually believe it's the opposite. Your lived experience is more valuable than formal education. I mean, you and I both went to school. We learned all this stuff about teaching, and then we stepped into the first hour of our teaching experience and we're like, huh, what? None of that actually works. And I think the same is true in coaching. And when we just give ourselves the permission to go, okay, what am I really good at? Like what skill set do I have? How do I package that up? Then there is a light that happens inside of our coaching business that also leads to direct profitability.
Totally. And I think too, like sometimes you're so in it that you don't realize. Like I had one of my clients who helps writers. And I can see right away, like, oh my gosh, your writing is so clear. Like I understood it right away. But to her, she was like, oh, I didn't think about that because I'm always surrounded by writers and I don't think of that as a difficult skill. But for the rest of us, where I'm like writing an email being like, what word should I use? Does this make sense? Like
Yeah,
writing
totally.
isn't my first skill, right? It's really great to think like just because the people that you are around or that the people that you talk to on a regular basis, it might feel simple for that, but it's not necessarily going to be simple for someone else. So I like that you pointed that out. Yeah.
Totally.
So I would love to hear a little bit about frameworks. Like when you talk about frameworks, what does that mean to you? Why is that important? Let us know a little bit about that.
Yeah. Overarching definition, my definition of frameworks is a step-by-step process that guarantees results. And the way I see it is there are macro and micro frameworks. And so macro frameworks tend to be utilized to curate results over a longer period of time. This would be a great example and popular one. I'm just going to use some like really common ones are like Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps. If you're familiar with personal finance space, Dave's steps are simple, but it will take most people months to years to be able to pay off their debt, create reserves, and grow wealth, right? Where in contrast, we have also micro frameworks. Those are things that are used over very small timeframes to get results. A really common one that I always talk about is like stop, drop, and roll. In the US specifically, I don't know how it is everywhere else, but like we had that framework, stop, drop, and roll ingrained in us from the very beginning of kindergarten to get away and be safe if we caught on fire, which I think is funny because it's like we were taught that so much. I'm like, is this really that common? Like, really?
I guess I've heard that one.
Okay. But I mean, we're surrounded by frameworks from fitness frameworks to food frameworks to business frameworks. And so in other words, it's a process that is taking you on a specific path to get consistent results.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, we did the stop, drop, and roll. I just don't know that many kids who have caught on fire, but maybe it's because it's stop, drop, and roll. I don't know.
I don't know.
Who knows? But I mean, my boys get up to all sorts of shenanigans. So, I can see why they came up with that. But I think that's a really interesting take. And actually something I was talking about with my clients today is for me, a framework is like that visual framework, but you kind of take it a step further and it's about the actual steps that you get to guarantee results for your clients. Is that what you would say?
Yeah. A visual is only just a fraction of the process. When I teach framework building, I walk them through my framework and I see it as 3 phases. Phase 1 is what I call the reverse design process, coming from a curriculum development background. It's actually thinking like, where do I want my client to be at the end of the journey with me? And then how do I reverse engineer the milestones in a tangible way? And why this is so important is there's a lot of winging it type coaches, or let's be real, we're in an industry that's saturated. People that are like, I can help somebody. And they just like throw spaghetti at the walls. They have really no idea what's happening. And there's many great coaches, but they're coaching and they're not sure, like, are my clients getting results?
Yeah.
And that's because they haven't reverse engineered, like, okay, Lauren, what do you want your client to be able to be, do, and have at the end of 6 months working with you? Like, let's make sure you know what those things are and are measurable. And then we go through the process of kind of grouping them together, reverse designing, looking at the deliverables or content to give the client. And then at the very end, once we have that process done and we see the big picture, then we build a visual to represent what that thing is. And the visual is less for us. It's more about showing a fast track for the potential client to go, okay, Lauren's got a process. She has done this before. And anytime your client can see that, it's a fast track to authority and trust. And so the visual in the name of the framework is just like a tiny piece of the larger process of effectiveness, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that you pointed it out that way, because one thing that I've seen people say is like, I do something similar. I think it has I come about it from a different way, but I look at it mini result milestones. Like, what are the main mini results that you get to the final results? And sometimes
Totally.
people say to me like, well, how do I create my mini results? Like, I'm kind of vague on that, but that's because there's actually a lot that goes into it first. And you need to be able to get clear on what are the main results that are going to, like, what are the topics? What are the outcomes of those topics? From those main topics, what are the sessions? What's the outcome of the session? And once you have that whole outline, then you can pull back and make it really simple for someone and say, these are the 5 steps or the 4 steps that are going to get you that main result, which sounds like what you do visually, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's not all of everything that goes into it underneath.
Yeah, we hang out in like the details and then zoom out for a high level overview, because truthfully, the other way around isn't really effective for most. They can't see it. And then once they know the little pieces, they can see kind of the larger process that demystifies whatever, they're coaching. And the thing I would tack on to this, which I think is extremely relevant, is the other reason that coaches struggle with this process or seeing their process is they're working in super vague language and they're talking about things that are intangible. And so they say things like, I help coaches feel empowered. I help them live a healthy life. I help them live their best life. And we can't measure any of those things. What is best? What is healthy? What is empowered? And so this is one of the reasons I think a lot of coaches have, well, it could be failure to launch, but also could be failure to be profitable in the way they want to be, is they hang out in that vagueness and they're not really sure what are the tangible things that I'm going to give and coach my client around that are going to yield an empowered feeling or a healthy feeling. Like, what healthy looks like for you is going to look very different for healthy for me. And so this, I think, is probably one of the golden nuggets that happens inside of the Framework Builder Lab, is most coaches realize they've been totally failing at that part. And when they flip it, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, okay, now I get what you're trying to do.
Totally. And I think that's that idea of like the curse of coaching, when you have a lot of knowledge, but you don't necessarily know how to articulate or communicate it in a way that people are going to understand. Yeah. Because I think sometimes like a lot of coaches will say like, I help people love themselves more, or like, I help people create more self-love in their life. And if people just knew that that was the vehicle to the result that they wanted, they would do that, right? It's not like we walk around going like, if only I could love myself more, unless you're a coach. But most people aren't going around with that level of awareness. They're saying, I want a better relationship with my adult children. I want to have a better, totally. I want to, have a healthy response, I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to get fit, or whatever it is. And they don't realize that part of it is because they're missing self-love. But if they knew that, like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just speak to the vehicle. You need to speak to the result, the actual words that your clients are using. So then you can actually say that I'm going to be able to help you because I've got these tools.
Yeah, agree totally. And most of us get into this because we care about helping people first, and we're service-based and heart-driven. And we come from some sort of expertise, not in marketing, not in sales. And then all of a sudden we realize, oh crap, we have to learn how to speak the language of the ideal client that helps them see that we are the solution to their problem. And it takes a lot of time and practice for that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. One of the big reasons I wanted to have you on is some of your strategies. I love them. But before we do, we're going to get into more advanced strategies, how you can have more consistent revenue, more consistent not necessarily launches, but consistent revenue and some strategies around that, because I think Amanda has a lot of great ideas. But before we go into that, one of the questions that I get sometimes is I usually help clients really create their signature programs, their structure, those kinds of things. But sometimes people come to me and they say like, I have my coaching certification, but I don't know how to get my first clients. Do you have any advice for that kind of group before we get into the more advanced stuff?
Yeah. For somebody that is fresh out of a certification or not even just freshly decided, hey, I'm going to go coach people up. A few tactics. I'll be super tangible with this. One of my favorite ways, and it's worked really well for clients that are in my world that are newbies, is just to be transparent and make a post on maybe Facebook where you have like a personal following and it says something like, hey, I am so excited. I've opened up my coaching business. I help, and do the best you can with articulating what that is. I'm looking for a few beta clients to get better at, my coaching skill set or whatever. Let me know if you would be interested or something like that. It's the most cheesy thing and it's just so simple. And I would say 9 times out of 10, there's somebody that comes in the DMs or even on the comments and puts a hand up. And the reason I suggest this is because our rule in my community, the BDC, is one free client. That's always the thing I say is you get one free client. And why I say this is I do think there is something to be said with just like working with somebody for free to like work out the kinks, the shakes, the nerves, the jitters. But I don't want you to do more than that because it easily can become a pattern of not charging or fear of charging. So even after that one, you're only charging like $20. I still want you to get in the practice of asking for money. But what I see more often than not is when you have a great framework and you are taking on that first client, when you get really great results, that client, as long as you do it well and put them into some sort of finite container, you're not like, we're going to coach forever for free. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this for 3 months. I see most of my coaches pull that person into becoming a paying client. And I kind of teach them, hey, start with free, over deliver. That will become your first paying client. And all it takes is one amazing client to give you a testimonial, to become a billboard for your work. And then organic, traction can absolutely happen. So I don't think you need a fancy webinar strategy. I don't think you need to be on social media. I think what it can really boil down to is either a reach out like that on social media, or another option could be, doing the same thing, but sending text messages out to like your network of people already and see who chimes in and plays back. Or you could go get involved in, into communities like Facebook groups, where your ideal client is hanging out and offer like services there, as though you're starting out. And I think it's a great way to just kind of garnish a jumpstart.
I love that. And that is so helpful because that is one of the questions that I get sometimes. And honestly, that's not how my business started because I started creating digital products for people. And I started creating something called Teachers Pay Teachers, which is like Etsy for teachers. And I never actually had first clients. Like I hadn't had that experience. So that's why I knew that you would have some great ideas for folks that are just starting out. So thank you for sharing those.
Yeah. My first clients came to me because they saw my transformation. And I had somebody hit me up in the gym, was like, hey, will you help me? Sure. Okay.
Oh,
What does that look like? Okay. So then I kind of built my framework around it. And then she started having results and more people were like, what are you doing? Right. And then she was telling her people and it grew very, organically. So the thing that is woven through it all is a framework that guaranteed, inevitable success. So if you're doing that thing, but you're also making sure that your process is locked in tight, then I think it's just a recipe for long-term success.
Totally. I love that. So kind of switching gears. So for people who are maybe listening, who might be saying, I have a program that I've launched a couple of times, or I want to have a little bit more consistency. I really like some of the strategies that you've been using. I've been listening to your podcast, and Amanda and I were in a coaching program together for a little while. So I would love to know from you, what kind of recommendations would you make to people who want to have more of a consistent flow, be it with webinars, or I know you have a small offer that you're talking about as your new offer, maybe you can share about. What would you say for people who want to have a little bit more consistency and predictable revenue as they move forward?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to be transparent. I've lived a little bit feast and famine through this process too, of growing a business where you have this influx of clients and then it's like crickets for months. And for me, that took a toll I was like, I don't like this. I don't like this feeling of insecurity. And so years ago, I knew I had to find, a better way to do that, which is one of the reasons I started a podcast years ago, is because I knew it was a way to nurture my clients and to be able to give calls to action and build a relationship and deepen that rapport. And that's been, a great strategy, but it's still the top of the funnel strategy, right? Because there are plenty of what in our community, we call them passionate voyeurs. There are people that are consuming the content, but you don't know who they are because they haven't opted into an email option, or, they're on social liking something, or not even liking something, just consuming your content, but you don't even know that they are. And so in order for consistency to be curated in your business, you need to bring those, top of the funnel, passionate voyeurs into a more value driven space. And that's where I think consistency is key. And so like anything, if if I want in my business consistent clients, then that's going to require of me to be consistent in my actions. And I think we can all admit that's one of the hardest parts, right? Especially if you're used to being bossed by somebody and now you're your own boss, is you got to create that consistency, which for me will say, I feel like I'm pretty disciplined just in general in my life, which curates a lot of success. But I think you have to make a decision on what middle of the funnel or middle of your ecosystem strategy, like you just really enjoy and are really good at and are wanting to stick to in order to bring in consistent flow of clients. And for me, I think for you, maybe, that's webinars 100%. Coming from a teaching background, I audited my business years ago and was like, okay, where do I get clients? It was kind of like, oh, every time I teach live, I get clients. So then how do I do that more consistently? So it went from having like one webinar a quarter to having one webinar every month to having one webinar monthly, to last year I held a webinar pretty much every Tuesday. I held 41 webinars in 2024. And the reason I did that is because the more consistent I can be in that behavior, then the more I know clients are coming in, they're going through the sales process. And it just creates so much peace because it's not like so much up to this like launch, right? Like, oh my gosh, we got 90 days, this one thing, all my business success lays on the line of this one, webinar. I do not like that feeling. So I would much rather show up weekly and do a webinar. The pressure's off then. And the cool thing is I can fail quickly and I can make adjustments or change one variable and then test it immediately. If I'm only hosting a webinar every 90 days, then that's a big gap between when I'm able to try something new and implement it and get feedback. So it's a really long-winded answer, but for me, that is the way I want to run the business, is a non-live launch way. And it has nothing to do with what works better. I want to be clear. It's what does Amanda want her business to feel like in her life? And for me, it's consistency.
Totally. I completely agree with that. And I have done a variety. I've done now I do monthly webinars. I don't do it weekly yet,
That's
but
awesome.
I do it monthly.
Monthly's awesome.
Monthly is great. And I've done the launch, more of a launch style where you lead up and you've got the launch runway. And I've done sales calls, discovery calls, and I've done a bunch of different things. And I think the thing that I really liked about what you said is first, that consistency, and also finding the thing that you really enjoy doing. So Amanda and I both like teaching, of course. So for me, I love to do webinars because I love to connect with people and see people that way. And for me, it really works to actually teach something and do the same thing over and over and improve it and refine it. I've tried, people told me for a while, you got to go networking. You got to go networking. Networking's the way. Or you need to sell in the DMs, or you need to try in this discovery call strategy. And then you follow this and then you follow that. And it's not that there's one that's better than the other. It's just about finding the thing that feels best for you, that you feel aligned doing, that works well for you, and then refining that rather than trying all these different strategies all the time.
I'm with you. Networking is blah. I'm in some curated communities, but I know what I'm getting to, but I do not I'm trying to minimize my Zoom interactions in my life, not sit on them. And the other thing I don't like is there's an elephant in the room. Everybody's here because they want clients. So this just doesn't feel good for me. But that could feel great for people. And there are people in my coaching communities, my clients, that live by networking, and I teach them how to double down on it, right? So in our community, we talk about the V² framework. You should be working on two things: value and visibility nonstop in your business. you choose the value strategy and the visibility strategy. So my value strategy is webinars. My visibility strategy is exactly what I'm doing right now, being on podcasts. I love being on podcasts. I don't need to leave my house. I homeschool my son right now. So it gives me access to like being present in all the things. And me personally is like, I want to run what I call like a quiet business. I'm not actually interested in speaking on massive stages anymore like I thought I was. I am not interested in some of the things I thought like quote unquote had to have success. I really don't want to leave my kids. They're teenagers. I only have a few more years home with them. I'm sharing that because I want your listeners and like to remind ourselves that you build the business you want based on your strengths in the season of your life. And maybe in 7 years or 6 years, when my kids are both out of the house, maybe that's when I'm like, okay, I'm going to go speak on stages now. Like I'm ready. Like the kids are gone. This makes more sense. But that's what works for me. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Like this year I started, well, I guess last year, it's 2025.
Yeah.
Now that we're recording, I really started to lean into Facebook ads. And actually, once I got over the initial fear, if you're listening, sometimes my clients are like, I'd like to start Facebook ads, but they feel scary, which I completely resonate with.
Totally.
But
Me too.
for me, actually, it works really well because I like to create a system that I can improve and refine and test and continue tweaking. So that works with my personality style. So
Me
like
too.
Facebook ads honestly really work well for me. So it's really about finding that thing and then doing it again and again rather than doing what I used to do, which was try a bunch of different things.
Yeah. I love that you said that too, because I thought like we didn't start running ads in our first company till we were past like that 300K mark. And honestly, they weren't that effective at that moment. And so it felt risky for me. But what I realized the reason it was risky is because I don't have things fine tuned as far as my ecosystem and my funnel like I do now. So now for me, like Facebook ads aren't risky because for me right now, if I put in $1, I'm making $3 and change. I want to rev that up for sure. And that's our goal for 2025. But like, there's nowhere many you can really put in $1 and make, double that and do what we get to do. But it's taken time. And I remember with our previous mentor that we were together on, I was afraid to increase that budget. And something that he said to me was just like, what if you baby step it? Like, what if this week it's like $5 more a day, then the next week it's 5 more, and like you slowly, and it's almost like regulation of the nervous system as you increase. And that's really worked for me. So just a caveat for people that are there is like, you start your ads at like $5 a day. Like it's not that much money. And get them working and fine tune them. And then the beauty is as you level up.
Yeah. And then you can start like with everything, like if you're not trusting that your program's going to get results, the best way to do it is when you go out there, you test it, you see people's responses, and then you tweak it and improve it. It's the same with your ads. It's that you're going out, you try it a little bit, and then, okay, you're starting to get people that are like, some of them aren't quite right and some of them are the right fit. And you just continue tweaking and improving rather than being like, Facebook ads is this scary thing, which I used to feel. Yeah.
Totally. I get you.
Totally. Well, before we close out, is there anything else that you would share to call this episode complete?
There's one lingering thing on my heart that we kind of alluded to as well. I think the other consistency piece to just talk about how do I create that consistency in my business is, this is my perspective, but I believe that the coaching industry is in a massive trust recession. I think that people have invested and been burned, and we have PTSD, and we're like, that freaking word coach, and we can call it coach, mentor, practitioner. For me, I kind of do consultant. I think that the general person out there does lump those things together. Is we have direct marketing that's calling themselves a coach when they're really pushing a product. The term coach has been like super watered down. And so that makes it harder for us when we're selling services, unless we're selling, B2B, coach to coach, which is great because you and I both do that, but that's not for everybody. They've been burned equally. But why I think that's important is we have to think of the psychology of the buyer. It's a changing landscape. And I think the other thing that's critical to being consistent is also offering that like taste test offer. We call it the small buy offer, but it's giving somebody a taste of what it's like to work with you before they go into a higher ticket option. And the amounts are all relative depending upon your business. We've just seen massive success. Almost, I think we're at like 92% of the people in our higher ticket offers come from our smaller bite offers now. And so for me, it's just been a pivotal implementation in the last couple of years into my business. We started our most popular one, the Framework Builder Lab, about 2 years ago. And it just drastically shifted our business and created that consistency that I was seeking. So I would just say that's also it's not necessarily a more advanced strategy, but monitoring it, optimizing it would be where the advanced piece. But even my beginner coaches that are in my world, I teach them this is the two things you need: a small bite offer and your signature offer, and let them be an ascension, let them really build together. I think there's a lot that can be, a beautiful business model that can come out of that.
I really love that point because a number of years ago, my program was growing with my teachers and I had my sales mechanism. It wasn't what I do now. I feel much more aligned in what I do now. But I remember hitting this point where I was like, I hit a plateau and I was trying to grow, and either my sales were hitting a plateau or I was starting to drop off and I couldn't figure out why. And then I went on this big inquiry because I couldn't understand it. Like, being able to diagnose your business with problems is huge, right? And when I started to look at my client's journey, up until then, all of my clients had purchased teaching resources from me. So they had already they had already spent $10 to $50 to maybe even sometimes like $200. They had spent a smaller amount with me over time. Some of them had purchased multiple offers of mine. And so then when I asked them to come into a coaching program, it was a lot easier because they already trusted what I was going to do, because most teachers aren't going around looking like, if only I could join a coaching program. Like, that's not a thing.
Nobody is. Not even teachers.
No one is, right? No one is. And so once I realized that was part of the stumbling block for me growing, was that I wasn't growing those small offers. So when you can have that small offer and it can really build trust with people, it makes it a lot easier. And I'm sure you can think of it even as you're listening, if you've had an example of trying something smaller with somebody and feeling that trust, and then you can jump into the signature offer, it really makes a big difference.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Amanda. It was great to have you. Where can listeners find you if they want to connect with you after the podcast episode?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I host a podcast called Best Damn Coach. It's a great place to just listen to my work and be inspired, but super tangible as well. If you want to learn more about frameworks, I do have a webinar you can jump into whenever you want. And you can find that at amanda-walker.com/framework. And I go over kind of the mental shift that needs to be made to be successful, the steps, and just ways that your framework can make you money now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We will definitely be linking that up in the show notes so you can check out Amanda. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Amanda. It was great to have you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful.